I'm Alex Howard.
I'm Amanda Silver, and this is Dirty Laundry. It was fun watching you write a Christmas card today.
I already know what you're going to say. Listen, I blame my poor spelling on the fact that I was in French immersion in my very early elementary years.
Let me just explain for our DL fam here. So Alex is sitting writing a Christmas card, and like we obviously do everything together, right? Christmas cards. I'm loading the dishwasher.
Super professional business relationship.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I see her struggling, like with herself, going, "Is this an E? What's a D? Oh no, she's scratching it out. I need to start it again." Yeah. And she's going on her phone. She's looking something up. I'm like, what's happening here? Like I mixed up a word.
I don't know how to spell.
No, it's not that you don't know how to spell. This was a difficult word.
It
so
was.
I was
Thank
being
you.
all cocky. And I was like, ha, what did you not be able to spell? And then you told me the word. I was like, yeah, no, I don't think I could spell
But
that
the
one
best
either.
part, what I was really jazzed about is that you prepared it as if it was a spelling bee.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, Amanda, getting so cocky,
I was
mocking
so cocky
me.
about, I can spell that.
And so
sleep.
I go,
yeah.
Okay, tell me how to spell tutelage.
Tutelage.
And you got up there in front of the sink and you said, tutelage. T, and then you just kept going like as if you were literally on a stage.
Yeah.
And in my defense, you got it wrong.
I got it wrong too.
Yeah. So we both suck at spelling.
I think I'm a good speller for them. No, I'm a teacher. You can't say that.
Okay, fair.
I think for the most part, I'm a good speller, but that was a hard word.
It was a real tricky one.
So my response was, you know what? I'm not going to use a word in my vocabulary if I can't spell it.
You know what? And
tutelage is out of my vocabulary.
I thought to write it in
tutelage.
pen.
How would you spell tutelage? To me, it's like a French word.
Yeah,
tutelage.
Zut alors.
Exactly.
Write in how you think it's spelled.
Please do. Please write us in. Do not Google it.
Don't you dare Google it.
Don't spell check.
Don't use
You write what you think,
autocorrect.
how you think tutelage is spelled. So today on Dirty Laundry, we have the second part of our incredible episode with Dr. Nita Mafrici and Dr. Michelle Foster from Toronto Psychology and Wellness Group. And we are going to be continuing our discussion about eating disorders, healthy eating,
quote
and
unquote.
unhealthy eating and disordered eating and all the things on our episode today.
Because we had way too much to talk
sure.
about. The conversation was so wonderful with such valuable information.
They're such a wealth of knowledge. Like I could have kept speaking to them, talking to them for hours. Like they're really incredible.
So knowledgeable, so gentle and kind and caring with their approach.
And real,
Obsessed.
They're not
they're parents themselves.
They're not preaching about what, the ideal, way of raising your kids are. It's like they want to meet people where they're at, which is really what they're all about. So I'm really excited to continue this conversation today.
So welcome back, Nina and Michelle. Can we talk about how healthy eating is like a privilege? Like how it costs so much to eat fruits and veggies and like the packaged shit
organic
is,
like,
exactly.
I mean,
which is a huge myth in general.
The whole organic thing is,
it's total BS.
I only eat organic or
But like how do families that can't maybe access some of those more healthier options, like what are options in and around conversations about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important. We often get into this discussion too with students in college that are moved out of their parents' place and things like that, and they're trying to make it on their own.
They're
and
living on ramen.
Yeah, they're living on ramen and things like that. And so how do we destigmatize those what's considered like the healthy options all the time? Like frozen fruit and veg are great options, right? Going and shopping and getting sort of the sale items and the discount items, and also understanding and appreciating that there's a lot of good stuff in packaged goods, right? Like we can still get a tremendous amount of nutrients and resources, and really we're trying to expose people to variety. So, less about, you need to get this specialized food, and really it's all marketing, right? And you see it through those fads. It's like it goes into these different products, and everyone's into these like keto products now that are all cost a lot of money, and it's
chemicals anyway.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think you totally hit on it there, this idea of frozen fruit and veg too. And we often do this like with our kids, for example, who are picky eaters. So let's say a parent comes in and they're like, oh my gosh, my kid will only eat Kraft dinner and I need them to start eating some vegetables. Okay, well, once upon a time they tried a little bit of this like cheesy broccoli thing and they ate it, but they haven't touched it since. Right. Okay, can we start adding like a little bit of frozen broccoli into the Kraft dinner, right? And all of a sudden you're boosting slightly some of the nutrients. Right. But again, I'm not going to say Kraft dinner is going to be the healthiest thing to eat all day, every day, but there's still nutrients in it, right?
Same with like food. Like I would say fed is best. That has always been my motto. Like when I had my babies and I nursed one and I supplemented and all the things. It was always, to me, fed is best.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. I always say, like, I have a thing for Lucky Charms. I'm obsessed with them.
Do you pick out the charms?
I just eat the whole thing. Okay. But like, the charms are obviously the best part. And you can get the bags of just the charms.
I haven't. Oh, don't tell me that.
You can. But they are very high in iron. Okay, great. So
fortified,
then the marshmallow, right?
Fortified. Or the whole cereal.
All of it. And if you have it with milk, it can actually inhibit the absorption of the iron. So you should just like go straight up and eat
milk inhibits the absorption of the iron in the fortified cereals.
Sometimes it can because calcium inhibits iron. So we also work with a lot of dietitians that help to dispel all of these myths. Wow. And so it's great. Like, listen, I'm all for, trying out the latest TikTok trend of, I don't know, like some fancy dessert, whatever. But like really when it comes down to it, what's going to be easiest for your family? Right. What is going to limit your stress when it comes to eating and preparing dinners? Sometimes that's the frozen lasagna, like whatever it is, the Kraft dinner. All of that needs to be included. Kids need to grow up realizing that there's no good and bad when it comes to these things, right?
And you talked about exposure. Like, is variety really the spice of life? Is that a good goal for parents? If you just like mix it up, just keep trying things, exposure, and eventually, maybe these picky eaters or anybody with baggage, like, well, this item is new. I don't have any associations, good or bad.
Yeah, I would say gradually you want to get there, but I love doing exposures with people. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I try to follow their lead. So we tend to go with, okay, where is this pickiness or where is this issue causing the biggest problem in your life? And so sometimes kids will come in or teens will come in and they'll say, birthday parties or dating. I can't go out on a date, right? And by the way, you're talking to somebody who literally ordered the kids menu at their own wedding, right? Like I get it because I am a picky, I do. I'm a picky eater, so I get it. But I love that, which is show me where you're motivated and let's start there. And then it's so reinforcing for them. It's like, they come in and they say, guess what I did this week and guess what I tried. And we celebrate together and then we level up, right? It's like a video game. You just slowly increase, but from where they are motivated. Yeah. And I think sometimes if you just attack it from where the parents want you to go, you're not always going to be as successful. Also because their own judgments, as you were talking about, and their beliefs tend to actually like bleed into that a little bit and
can sabotage the treatment. No,
it absolutely can sabotage the treatment, right? Parents who are on board and willing to be positive role models and willing to get in there and face that discomfort for themselves too will have more successful treatment outcomes. They'll get through treatment faster, more effectively, right? We face a lot more roadblocks with parents that put up those barriers.
What happens when you have somebody who does actually have a need, like an allergy or an intolerance or a vegetarian preference or, something that takes them outside of the family?
Yes.
And therefore now we are creating a second meal or we're showing different styles of eating. Yeah. How does that role modeling kind of work out?
Yeah, you've got it. She's looking at me because I have celiac. And so she knows that that's something that comes up and that I talk about with people often, even when we're doing exposures. Like we'll often, I can't always model the same thing, right? So for example, we work on top of a grocery, like our office is on top of a grocery store. And so we'll often go down together and we'll pick out different things that they want to try. And I will always explain to them, so I have celiac disease, and because of that, I have to pick something that's similar but a little bit different. So I can't have this Mr. Big with you, but I can have, I don't know, something else, right? Yeah. So I'll pick an equivalent and enjoy it together. And sometimes, like with families, we'll talk about that with them. So mom can't eat this, but here's something else that she's going to try instead. So maybe she needs to have a gluten-free bun with her burger, but she's still having a bun with her burger. And I think that tends to be more of the issue, is not actually like the allergies, but it's more so the like the holding back on like full components of a meal. But I will say that periodically we do see allergies or preferences or things that kind of feed into
I was going to ask
eating
you, like,
disorder.
where does the allergies and the intolerances stop, and like the, and the other things? Because I feel like some people use it as a mask.
They absolutely
correct me if I'm
do.
wrong, as a mask for an
They
eating disorder,
absolutely
right?
do.
I can't eat that. I can't eat this. I can't eat this, and it's just
So
because it's socially
it's part
acceptable
of-
way of not eating when you go out for dinner. Right?
Exactly. Part of when people come to our clinic, they're part of a comprehensive assessment, which includes a medical component, it includes a psychological component, and it includes a nutrition component. And so each of those components allows us to identify, okay, what's really going on here? If there's somebody who's saying like, I can't tolerate dairy, I must be allergic to dairy, right? Well, we'll investigate that first, right? There'll be some medical clearance to determine if that's the case, or really are they afraid of fat in dairy, which some people are, right? We do see definitely a correlation between certain sensitivities or allergies and the incidence of eating disorders. So sometimes it breeds out of there due to things like restriction and limited, food available to them. And we also see it as an excuse, especially in some teens, and also a lot of the time in parents. So parents who will say, I'm not that I'm celiac, and we're super sensitive to this now because it's really hard to go out and eat sometimes, right? And for somebody with celiac disease, it's a life-altering condition that makes it really, really challenging. So when someone says, oh, I can't eat gluten, but it's not celiac disease, it can actually be very invalidating to other people. And so we really try and work with families and kids and teens to be able to, identify, is there a real allergy there? We certainly work with families, for instance, who keep kosher, who are vegetarian, who are vegan. We try our best to sort of make sure that they have really good variety within that and are still given exposures within those domains.
You can map it out too and kind of get a sense. So like we've had people who, they come in and they say they're vegan, but the onset of that was right after somebody made fun of their weight. And then, they started being vegan, they lost a lot of weight, and then it sort of took off from there. And so sometimes it is really disentangled, and you do have to work on, what are the thoughts behind it, and how can we start challenging that and looking at weighing the pros and cons of certain things, right?
Absolutely.
And speaking of weight loss, I'm curious about the Ozempic effect because I feel like it's just exploded
everywhere.
It's everywhere, and all the Ozempic
the quick
drugs,
fix
right?
drug,
And I get that. I'm sure it's probably a miracle drug for some people who are really suffering with obesity and all the complications that come with it. But then there's
a whole lot of people who are on it for not those right reasons, right? And I think, again, that it's really hard for the people that are on it in a way that was medically prescribed for things like diabetes and so forth. We see a lot of questions coming up about Ozempic. A lot of youth that come into our office that says, my aunt, is now 50 pounds less. And she talks about how she takes this new drug that, makes it so much easier. Of course, kids who are feeling, self-conscious in their bodies and just want to be able to eat, but feeling so uncomfortable, want something like a quick fix, right? And there are instances where, medications like Ozempic are used for children who are, who are diabetic, and that has to be, carefully prescribed under a doctor's, guidance. But we see it more with adults that come in with eating disorders, who, will sort of come with their tail a little bit between their legs, sort of acknowledging that they've started taking Ozempic. And that's, a bigger conversation. Listen, people are entitled to doing what they would like to do and taking charge of their health in their own way. Our whole approach is to discuss, the pros and cons and short and long-term consequences. And that's one of the biggest things is we just don't know, right?
And And I think with that, think even too about like bariatric surgery. So with
Yes.
There you
both
go.
of these
Yeah.
things, right, you do tend to see
Yes.
an increase of eating disorders long
Yes.
term, because what happens when you lose weight, you all of a sudden feel
Yeah.
this sort of like high, right?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
rush.
And you're getting so much
All of
positive
it.
You're
feedback.
getting
Right.
a lot more.
So
It's like,
then-
when does it stop?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then when you stop, what happens is you gain back the weight, or you
Yep.
go back to sort of normal eating. And with something like bariatric surgery, that can happen long term, right? And slowly you start gaining weight or not losing weight anymore, and you feel a sense of shame, you feel down, right? Your clothes aren't fitting anymore. Then you start panicking that, oh God, this is happening again, right? And
Yeah.
so you then start to see eating disorders develop. And so no matter what one decides to do, you just have to be aware that there are no quick, easy fixes that are without risk. And I think that, this brings us to the notion too of like medical professionals. And I think one of the biggest things that we see in eating disorders is people come in and they say that back in the day, their doctor said to them, oh, you're gaining too much weight, or this health condition is strictly because of your weight, when it wasn't necessarily, right? And there are a lot of incredible doctors. And there are some that are less trained in eating disorders. And what we know is that it's like an hour to 2 hours of training in med school for eating disorders as a standard, right? But then depending on
What you're
where,
special, like if you're going to
Yeah.
pediatrics,
exactly,
you probably
right?
learn
maybe
more,
learn
but
more.
right,
Yeah,
but not
and
enough.
So like often people are very knowledgeable about the risks of excess weight and diabetes and things like that. And so that seems like the primary concern. And Ozempic is a really great way to fix that. We just have to acknowledge the flip side and the risks with it, right?
What about exercise? Is this something you guys deal with? Yeah, like maybe over exercising?
Yeah, lots of folks who are over exercising. We work with a lot of athletes. So we work with a lot of competitive and non-competitive athletes, but certainly again, sort of teasing out what is the sport and what's required of your training, especially for those training for the Olympics or other sort of high performance sports, versus when is it going too far, right? And so we talk a lot about things like torture size, right? So when it's torture size is, are you pushing yourself to work out or exercise when you're not feeling well, when you're injured, when you're sleep deprived, right? Those are all warning signs, or to sort of compensate for a larger meal that you've had. So those take a special sort of team of treatment where we're working really closely with a dietitian that specializes in athleticism and sport to be able to manage and monitor like what is going to allow you to perform well in your sport, right? What nutrition do you need? And also, we still need to challenge a lot of those pre-existing norms that are keeping you stuck in an eating disorder.
That's one of the places where I'll say like parents being on the same page is really important, especially with teens, because we have a lot of families that are really invested in their kids' sport,
Yes.
right? I'm like a very intense hockey mom. I get it. And it's like, no Olympic athletes over here, but we'll see often parents will be like, nope, this is the number one thing. They need this for their mental health. They can't stop exercising. They can't stop engaging in their sport. Meanwhile, their heart rate is like borderline and it's not actually safe for them to do so. And so that's where it can become this push-pull too, where like one parent wants them to stop, the other one doesn't. And we have to really work with the whole team on getting everybody on the same page and protecting their health.
And looking out really for the best interest of the child, which is a lot of the work that we do, which is so hard with all the family dynamics and everybody has their own interests, and really focusing on that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, dating and birthday parties, all of these things that can trigger us when we have to go out. We are circling the drain around the holidays here. Like this is probably the most triggering for a lot of people because you have family of origin baggage that's coming to head and you're trying to protect your children maybe from some of that.
Yeah.
And it's all surrounded by treats on treats on treats.
Yeah.
How in the world do we navigate this? How do we do it for us as parents to make sure, again, we're role modeling? And then again, what's the messaging and what's the conversation? Give us some tips and tricks to survive these holidays.
Honestly, I think first and foremost is trying to get parents aligned and to not use food as a way to compete with one another, right?
Yes.
So any kid, like if I took my kid into the store and I was like, you could pick any chocolate bar you want, they would be so excited about that. And it's like, okay, well, if you know that one parent doesn't allow these kinds of things and another one does, it's a way to kind of get a leg up. And so we see a lot of that. And I would say at the holidays where there's more of these foods around, right? Just being mindful of that and making sure there's equal ground of sort of what's being offered to kids. I think that's a first and foremost that we try to get families to agree on for the protection of the kids.
Yeah.
It's a control method too, and especially with co-parenting with parents who aren't necessarily getting along, they really weaponize everything.
Oh yeah,
right?
and there's
Everything.
the divorce guilt, so you're being
Yes.
extra
So,
generous
one
or
is
laissez-faire.
showing
with
you
rules.
I'm in control. I'm the the authoritative parent. I'm not going to let you have that just because dad lets you or mom lets you, and it really you lose sight of what message are you sending your child.
You do, and we really, really don't want to use food as sort of reinforcement or punishment in those ways. So maybe even just making the agreement that that's not going to be utilized. That we can come together as a team, and it's the holidays, and the holidays is a typical time when we are going to eat more sweets
indulge,
and more and enjoy that and celebrate that. Parents need to be mindful of not restricting themselves leading up to big holiday dinners, right? Show mindfulness in sitting down and having your normal breakfast, your normal lunch before going to your Christmas dinner or Hanukkah dinner or whatever it is, because that's really important for also self-regulation. It teaches kids, okay, I can nourish my body and yeah, we might eat a little bit more tonight and that's okay too, right? The other big thing to watch out for is other families members' comments, right?
It's so hard. It's so
People
hard.
are just
gonna say,
tough
"Oh, I
one."
ate so-"
Or like, oh, look, you've lost so much weight, right? And reinforcing that being, something that's celebrated. Or, oh my goodness, you've gotten bigger, haven't you? Right? It's really, really hard to navigate those dynamics, especially for a young person. So parents need to really be mindful of that. They need to be able to intervene when necessary.
Like an aunt
right?
says something or a grandparent.
You know what? We're trying not to make comments about body
I was
sizes.
gonna say, is it
appearances.
more validating, or I guess like disrupting that cycle to just call it out, or
In front of the child.
in front of the child, in front of this other adult, or is it better to go pull you aside? Okay, Aunt Susie, she's got some weird baggage around eating, but like you're good. Let's just move on. Go enjoy the party.
Either or.
I think it totally depends on the family. It depends on the kid, right? If your kid is going to internalize that in that moment, and that's something that Aunt Susie's going to keep badgering on, we want to nip it right in the bud, right? There and then. But otherwise, talking about it with your kid before or after that so-and-so likes to talk about other people's bodies and appearances and it's super annoying. Like no one should have to do that or deal with that or feel that, right, is also important conversation
And
to
how do we
have.
want to respond, right? Like, she's probably going to say this stuff. I've tried talking to her 100 times and she's not taking it. So if she says something, what are you comfortable with me doing? What can we say? Like, I remember as a kid, once my grandmother was like, your tuchus got bigger, And I'm like, okay, thanks. Like, it's just,
we come home from camp, it's like, oh, you look healthy.
Right. And I think this sort of brings us to the question is, who are you talking to, right? Like if it's just a kid that doesn't have an eating disorder, but any kid is sort of self-conscious in their body, that might be like a little thing that could set them off, or maybe they're totally fine. But if you say something like that to a kid who does have an eating disorder, if you're going to holiday meals with kids who have eating disorders or teens, or as yourself as a parent, then you have to do sort of like some pre-planning about how we're going to navigate certain stressful situations.
I like this idea. Talk about it in advance, right? We all know the members of our family for the most part. So if we can arm them, with maybe some lines of defense, or even just, ignore Aunt Susie, she's nuts, move on.
Totally.
We call it not that language. Take it back, but you know what I
No,
mean.
we get it. We call it a cope ahead plan. So like, sometimes with anxious people, we talk about like, okay, you're always imagining the worst case scenario, but sometimes actually it's good to imagine the worst case scenario.
Allows us to plan and prepare, right?
So how are we going to navigate it? This is going to come up. what are we going to say? How are we going to get through it? And how can we imagine ourselves getting through it successfully?
Yeah.
And then people can go into these moments feeling a little bit better, right? Prepared.
Also, not policing your kids' food over the holidays either, right?
We definitely have a party rule. Eat whatever you want, just leave me alone.
Yeah, just like not going to the thing and calling out, especially in front of other people, so shame-inducing, right? We see it happen all the time, right?
Like,
that you've had too much, you really want that, right? And other people will start to step in and do that. So that's when we want to squash that. We don't want to police our kids' food. You know, the holidays is not a time to start setting rules, regulations, education around what they should and shouldn't be eating
It's
at
going
all.
to balance itself out, right? And that's the idea, is like the more control a parent tries to exert on their kids or teens eating, the more harm they're going to cause,
resistance.
you know, and resistance and resentment and damage, all the things. And it's like, think about, I don't know, if you go away on vacation and you're eating more stuff that you normally wouldn't eat. You're having your pina coladas and your cake and whatever, dessert at every meal. What's going to happen when you come home and you're not having those things anymore? It's going to balance itself out
Right.
more or less, right?
You're going to
Unless
get back
there's,
to your routine.
Yeah,
you're going back to
let
your
it
routine.
be.
Yeah.
Let it be. It's fine. You're probably walking on the beach more. You're swimming more. You're doing other things. Like, let it be. And I think we often say, you know, weight loss in kids is never something you're really targeting. You want to target, you know, you want to see them grow and things might level out over time, but you don't want them falling off their curve. And very often, I think parents get so hung up on their kids' weight that they start restricting them inadvertently, and it really harms that relationship with food.
We have to remember as parents that we are born into these bodies. Our kids are born into these bodies that are genetically predisposed to sort of a certain weight and growth curve, right? That's why we look at those growth curves when we're establishing things like progress weights with eating disorders, because you see it follow this trajectory. And some parents might want their kids to be lower. Guess what? Not going to happen. You're always going to go back to where your body's meant to be.
Okay, this is a toughie.
Yes.
Your kid comes to you and they say, I'm fat. Like, where even to begin with that conversation? Because yes, we want to be like, what? No.
And
Right.
that's every parent's initial response.
Right? But then you're like, okay, so I'm just invalidating
them
and dismissing
so
how
now
you
they're just
feel.
not gonna-
But God, is there a harder question? I would rather talk
Curiosity.
about sex and
Yeah.
drugs
I
and
know,
rock and roll
I know.
and
Me too.
anything else.
Me too.
Please
Me
don't tell
too.
me you find yourself fat. Like, it's so hard and
I
heartbreaking.
know.
Yeah.
What does
I
that
know.
mean,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
because
So stay curious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
curious.
like stay
Stay
curious. Where did you hear that? What are you focusing on when you say that? What part of your body? What are you thinking, right? Like, get more information about it first, because we automatically, I think often as parents, we go to reassurance. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're fine, right? And what we're doing when we do that is we are actually reinforcing this idea that fat equals bad, right? Which isn't the case. And so being able to have a conversation about what is fat? Yeah, you know, we all have fat on our bodies, you know, and all bodies are meant to look differently. And what
fat
is it?
doesn't equate to unhealthy, right?
Exactly.
that's a
So
big one.
what is it on your body that you're upset about? And what do you feel when you focus on that spot? So like having more conversations around that and coping, and I think judgments.
Yeah. Kids really look to your response there. Like, how are you going to respond? Are you going to respond like freaking out, or are you going to respond with that reassurance or that curiosity? What it does, it allows them to feel safe that, okay, this is something I can continue to talk about, right? If this bothers me, I can come back and be like, oh, you know what? Remember when I told you about that? Well, today somebody did call me fat and it made me feel really sad. Okay, let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about like, this is a perfect opportunity to unpack a lot of those unfortunate norms that we've been sort of bred to believe, right? That there's something bad about fat.
Yeah, you raised such a good point there, because sometimes it's not actually about being fat. Sometimes it's about my friends are judging me for what I wear, or I'm uncomfortable in my clothes, or I'm not popular, or I feel sad because I'm being left out. And this is the only way that I can make sense of it, because I know that people are judged based on their appearance. What's actually underneath it? And I think if you stay curious and you ask questions, then you can get at that that and actually address what they mean and what they're struggling with.
Versus addressing the things that we've assumed they must be thinking
Exactly.
and meaning.
And I was just going to say, I think that's such an important point is when something like that happens, your kid is inevitably going to come to you with something like that throughout our lives, is you as a parent going back on your own and challenging your own assumptions and asking yourself, how am I feeling in relation to my kid saying this? What's that bringing up for me, right? Because inevitably that is how we respond, usually based on our own preconceived notions, our own lived experiences with that, our own fears, all of it.
Or you're afraid that if you say the wrong thing that they're going to have an eating disorder, right? And then like, what if your child comes to you, maybe they're 15, they're 16, and they want to go on a diet because they are self-conscious about something and they don't like the way they look in the mirror. And you could tell them till, you know, you're blue in the face that they're beautiful and they're perfect and everyone has fat and all those things. But at the end of the day, they don't feel comfortable. They're not happy with something about their own body. How do you handle that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where even the same thing around the staying curious, right? Why the understanding of why is that individual going to that place to try and change their body. We know that for people going through eating disorder treatment, you know, the eating disorder behaviors are meant to cope with underlying emotions. So an eating disorder is not just about food and body. It's about the underlying anxiety and depression and self-worth and all of those things. So typically in those sorts of scenarios, it may not be enough as a parent to just sit and talk with your kid about that. That could be a great invitation to wanting to speak to somebody else and coming and saying, you know, yeah, like that, you know, it sounds like you're really struggling with something underneath that you're wanting to take extreme measure to sort of change your being. Kids, especially in adolescence, typically use weight control as a form of attaining social power and privilege in their peer environments, right? So it's one of those things, right? Yeah, like the popular girls, right? What do they look like? Well, I can't change necessarily, you know, my short hair and grow it out long or you know, my skin color or things like that. But I can change my body size. I can lose weight.
Yeah, I even had I've had this a couple times, but folks who present as non-binary or who are trans come in and they say, "Well, you know, I'm already considered," and I don't, I'm not necessarily endorsing that, but they'll say to me, "I already feel lesser than because I'm different in this way," right? Which I get makes sense, and so I need to look a certain way.
Yeah.
I need to be
play the
thin because then I have
level the
that
playing
element of
field.
power.
Level the
playing
Exactly,
field.
right?
Exactly.
So eating and body control is kind of used in that way, which is why we often see a higher incidence in that population. And, you know, if you think about dieting, it's known to be one of the primary causes of eating disorders. So if your kid, no matter who they are, comes to you and they say, I want to go on a diet, we have to have those deeper
red flag.
conversations.
That is-
And like we also have to be very careful about who we involve because there are so many professionals who look at that as, okay, great. You know, you want to be healthy. Well, let's do this. Let's do
Right.
that.
How do you know which professional to choose? And should you take them right away to a dietitian? Like, is that something that, or a nutritionist, is that something that you should do or not?
I mean, having seen this, I would say, and I want to be careful, like there are so many well-meaning practitioners who accidentally say things like, okay, you know, let's cut out this or let's cut out that, and who then end up causing disordered eating, or who say, you know, let's sure, maybe eat a little bit less and exercise a little bit more, and then they start getting hung up on it, right? So who do you go to?
Yeah.
I think it's very important to only seek out individuals who are specifically trained in eating disorders. Even if your kid does not have an eating disorder, if they're talking about restricting their intake, having somebody who can approach it from a health at every size kind of direction, or who knows the dangers of dichotomous labeling around food, that's, to me, that's like the key.
Yeah, because if what I'm hearing is you're saying there's so many more psychological reasons that the disordered eating is not the actual problem, it's the maybe solution, let's say, or band-aid, if you will.
Yep.
Then you actually need to be going to somebody who understands the psychology behind it, as opposed to just, oh, you need a healthy eating plan or like workout schedule.
That's when it backfires, right? And
Yeah.
parents, again, with well-intentions are, you know, will say, okay, we'll get you the gym membership or we'll do this or we'll start cooking with like a little less oil. And that is a very slippery slope to go down, right? So talk to your doctor, talk to your pediatrician. As Michelle said earlier, we don't want kids or teens losing weight. They're not supposed to lose weight in development. They're supposed to keep going on their growth curve in an upwards direction. And that is important for their brain health too, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very complex, very complex scenario. And so you want to talk to your physician, you want to get the appropriate resources, you want to speak to people who are specialized in the treatment of eating disorders.
Yeah. And if somebody is steering you in a path that doesn't feel right, or if you have concerns and your doctor or other provider is sort of saying to you like, they seem fine, or I'm not too concerned about this, but you feel concerned, get a second opinion, right?
Trust your mom instinct.
Yeah, it's so true. But we are told not to, right? Our whole life, we're like, oh, instincts, forget about it. Ignore that. Go on a diet. But now is the time to lean in.
Yes.
And really, we'll just send them to you. That's perfect.
So how can people find you if they're looking for some guidance to deal with all of these issues?
Yeah.
How do they find you?
Well, you can reach out to us on our website, www.tpwg.ca. We have offices located at Yonge and Lawrence in Midtown Toronto.
Nice.
We have about 50 staff members now that focus on an abundance of issues ranging from children all the way to older adults. And as I said, we do have our outpatient multidisciplinary eating disorder clinic. We provide virtual and in-person services, and we have medical housed in there too. So sort of a one-stop shop.
Amazing.
And we really, really strive to get people in quickly. That is a big feature of our practice.
Yeah, and I would say, we want to meet people where they're at. So people come and see us at all different spots sort of on the spectrum. And some people will say to us, I just want to meet with a dietitian first, or I just want to see a therapist to help me as a parent figure out like my language or how to navigate
before
things.
even involving the kids.
All of it,
Exactly.
right?
Oh, that's
I think
cool.
that's so important
Yeah.
too. Like as a parent, it's like sometimes the parent needs to go in first.
Yeah.
And it helps to ease their
fix my
concerns.
kid.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's
Totally.
I need to find out what's going on. I need to prepare myself to help my child.
Yeah, and a lot of parents have preconceived notions about what therapy looks like for their kids. They're worried about it, understandably these days, because there's a lot of people claiming to be health professionals in certain domains. I totally encourage parents reaching out and having an appointment first, talking to one of us, finding out our approach, getting some more insight in what we think that their kid could benefit from.
Oh, that's amazing.
wonderful.
Thank you both so much for being here.
Oh,
This was
it's our
so
pleasure.
great.
You guys are so fun.
Incredible.
Great.
So
like,
great.
It's just been wonderful. So
Thank
thank you.
you.
Our absolute
guys.
pleasure.
This episode was written and created by Alex Howard and Amanda Silver, produced, edited, and engineered by RTF Productions. Make sure to rate and review our show if you loved it, and give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcast to stay up to date on all upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening, and go easy on us. We're not your ex.